spiritual clothing for 2014 and beyond. And I actually want to begin by clarifying a point that I made last week. And I had talked about whatever we look upon and whatever we listen to, when it goes into us, it stays within us, and it affects what we can see in the spirit realm if it's not godly, holy things. But what I didn't clarify is that when we look at things or we listen to things that we shouldn't be, it impacts us, that if we repent of that, then we're free from that. And so that's really important, so you don't come under a spirit of condemnation, because I never speak from that. That's not my heart, but I wanted to clarify that. However, if you don't, and you just maintain in that, then it does impact what you can see, and what you can hear, and what you can receive from the Lord. But God is always gracious and quick to forgive. It's instantaneous, yeah. Because He is mercy, that's why. And so what I want to begin with is the next piece of clothing that we must put on, and it is actually one of the most important. Each one is that this is putting on love. But we're going to look at it from a way that's not often taught. Maybe for you it's familiar, but I've actually never really heard it taught before. And I'm going to begin by reading a couple of paragraphs again from Shepherd's Rod, Bob Jones, Shepherd's Rod, 2014. And this is what the Lord spoke to him. This was actually the beginning first word for 2014 that the Lord spoke to him. It was, love is the universal language that clears the truth. Its voice is soft as a whisper and gentle as a breeze. Its breath carries the authority of a lion, yet it speaks as gentle as a lamb. Its tears are full of compassion that heals the wounds of the heart. From conception till death, it feeds the spirit and never shall depart. Long after death, love is remembered in the hearts of those it knew. Love is a sweet remembrance and a gift to me and you. And this is a year we will begin to experience a release of the Father's love that is unparalleled to anything we've understood in the past. Through this unveiling of love, we will discover the realms of the Father's love and how to properly apply it to our daily Christian life. Although our walk may be challenging at times, we will have the sure cure for each difficult situation when we apply the love of God to each one. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole teaching of the 5 realms of love. I will tell you that there's 5 different realms of love, but the one that we're going to look at is actually what John 3:16 love is. And it is called agapeo. And it means this: to carry an affectionate reverence, prompting obedience, causing you to recognize the benefits of knowing this person or Christ, and refusing to live without or do without this person. That is what Christ meant when he said, love one another. See, that's very different from a casual, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. God bless you. See you next Sunday. Or whatever. Okay? This is not in any way a condemning thing. Remember, I've talked about the plumb line. He's setting a plumb line. What I'm trying to do is set a plumb line and set a standard for 2014 and beyond. And so I'm going to say it again. It's causing you to recognize the benefits of knowing this person or Christ. So it would be like knowing David or having a relationship with the Lord, and refusing to live without or do without this person. That means you will do whatever it takes to maintain this relationship, to keep this relationship, whatever this cost. And so basically, John 3:16, that's what he said. I refuse to live without those who are my children. And the only way I know to do that is to send my own son. very powerful. This is really a very powerful word. And this is what he's calling us to. It's not a casual thing at all. It's the deepest, this is the deepest love that there is. The deepest. The deepest. And the most profound. And he proved it by the cross. Don Potter, it's interesting, when God begins to speak something to us, I was going to an appointment the other day, and I knew I'd have a little bit of waiting time, and so I said, what book am I going to bring? And you'll all see my piles of books. And I was led to go to Don Potter's book, Things I Thought I Knew, that I borrowed from a friend, and I wanted to be able to return it to her. And so I said, gee, I started this like 3 months ago, I really need to finish this. And so I get to my appointment, and I'm sitting there waiting, and I open it up, and what does it open up to? The exact same thing. You see, when God goes hit, and then he hits it again. Like when he says, you know, verily, verily, I say unto you, what he's saying is really pay attention. He's trying to get your attention. And so he says this, the same agapeo, love, when used of love to God or Christ, the word involves the idea of affectionate reverence. He goes on to say, but be unwilling to abandon or do without this relationship, this love. Be unwilling to abandon or do without. The place of abandonment in people's lives is really pretty strong. Abandonment is a big issue, and we're not going to go into abandonment tonight, but he goes on to say this. As long as I feel good about someone, I think I'm loving them. That turns out to not be true. And until I'm in a place of bearing all things, willing to hide the faults and errors of others, believing all things, giving credit and confidence in someone, hope in all things, waiting for salvation with joy and confidence, and refuse to live and do without someone else, I'm not walking in love. Refuse to live and do without someone else, I'm not walking in love. You see, we're in a society where everything is throwaway, an instant. Change your computer. Change your phone. Change your job. Change your wife. Change your friend. Change your church. Everything is just change. If you don't like it, just change. That the place that God is calling us to in this year, he's been calling us to us all of our lives. He's been calling us to us from the cross, is this type of love. I can't do without. And what did he do? He took action and he pursued us. The great pursuer. So, Rick Joyner said this. He said the word koinonia, which is, I've heard many different terms for it, but what it really means is this: bonding together so close, the parts can't be separated without death. Now that's a powerful, powerful statement. Bonding so close together that the parts can't be separated without death. That's what koinonia means. Koinonia isn't singing songs around a campfire. Koinonia is this. It's not a simple, casual fellowship. Okay, you know, it's really unto death. It's covenant. And when it's actually when you're setting the plumb line in a church, when you're setting a plumb line in the body of Christ, when the apostles went in the early church, they didn't go in and set the structure of this is who's going to do this and this is who's going to do that. They set up koinonia. Then they came back in with ecclesia, which is the governmental structure, what it looked like. It was always koinonia. It was always the foundation of this type of a love, this type. Because in those days, people were being martyred. In those days, people were being persecuted. You could be grabbed any time and thrown to the lions, or, you know, hung on a cross or burned at a stake. It was nothing, having your head cut off. I mean, gosh, nowadays we get somebody at the desk next to us, and we flip out if they have a problem with us. Oh my God, they don't like me. Oh my God, they can't stand I'm a Christian. It's like, what? You know, we cannot walk in that type of offense, in that type of, I'm just going to say it, shallowness of faith. The persecution we receive in the United States is just that, and it's easy. It's a cakewalk. You follow what I'm saying? It's a cakewalk. So somebody doesn't like you. You know what? It's the opportunity to walk in the love of Christ. To astound them with a response they would never expect. The neighbor that's difficult. You follow what I'm saying? The situation that's difficult. So, that's the plumb line. Jesus began with 12, and he set relationships and true discipleship, true intimacy, and true koinonia. And this is what he used to build the body of Christ with. This is what he used. And this is what Abraham was looking for. What was he looking for? He was looking for a city on a hill. He was looking for what God was building, not what man was building. He was looking for what God is building. And quite frankly, that's what I'm looking for. What are you building, God? And what do you want us to build? What is it you're saying? Here's the plumb line that you're saying establish. What is it that you're looking to build? Do we see it? Is it God inhabiting the house? Is he inhabiting this house? Is he inhabiting our own individual homes? Is he inhabiting us? Is he inhabiting this city? Do we see a city and want to live in the reality of God's dreams, a city that God is building? And Rick Joyner said this, one of the greatest weaknesses in the body is to make converts but not disciples. Because true biblical discipleship is very rare today. And it must be recovered. Because disciples are this. They live every single day of their lives to become just like their master and do the works that he did. That's very different from somebody who says the sinner's prayer, I'm born again, and goes on with their life just the way it was. Oh, maybe they go to church, maybe they don't, maybe they read the Bible, maybe they don't. You follow what I'm saying? Maybe they pray, maybe they don't. But a disciple, and a discipling, mentoring and discipling, it's helping somebody else as we help each other to become like their master, who is Jesus, and do what he did every single day. That is discipleship. That's discipleship. And it's intentional. This isn't a casual thing. It doesn't just happen. It is intentional. It is purposeful. And Jesus was very intentional with his 12 for 3 years. Day in and day out, he walked with them. The kingdom of God is righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. And there is something else that God wants to do this year. And he wants to bring a deposit of joy. I'm convinced of that. I've heard it prophetically. Rick Joyner said, the Lord wants to visit with such a place of joy this year that the world will absolutely think that the body of Christ has gone crazy. Isn't that wonderful? I love that. Come on now. Joy. And I'm not just talking laughter. I mean joy. Joy that you walk in joy. Joy isn't you're laughing every second. Joy is a place of your heart like rest where there is joy. There is this joy, there's this contentment, this joy. Oh, hell may be breaking loose around you, but deep inside of you, there's joy. It's a plumb line. It's a foundation stone. It's a foundation stone we stand upon. The kingdom of God is righteousness, peace, and joy. That's what we stand upon. That's the plumb line. Now, Jesus ministered to the multitudes, but he had a group that he was very intentional with, and that was the 12. And then he had a more intimate group, that was the 3. And then he had a group that was bigger than the 12, which was the 70. And then he had the masses. He had all of these realms that he operated and functioned in and had relationships in. And so That's the way we need to be. Who's our 3? Who's our 12? Who's our 70? You follow what I'm saying? What is this? Each one of us is called to walk in close relationships. And there is one thing that God said that was not good, and that's what he said was loneliness. He purposely took Eve out of Adam's side because he says it was not good for Adam to be alone. We are not meant to be lonely in the body of Christ. And we are the answer to loneliness in the world. The body of Christ that knows what true koinonia is, true koinonia, and then reaches out to a lonely world and says, there's a place that you can come and not be alone and find true peace, true joy, and true love. The love of the Father flowing through us. And we don't need, it's more than superficial, casual relationships. The thing that scares me about Facebook is a great tool, but it's almost like there's this thing, I've got all these friends. I feel valued because of all these people I talk to on Facebook. Most of those people really aren't your friends. You follow what I'm saying? Some of them are because, Karen's my friend if I talk to her on Facebook, but honestly I don't talk to Karen on Facebook. I call her on the phone or we email. I have no need to talk to her on Facebook. Now, I'm not against Facebook. Facebook is great. But, you understand, there's all this surface stuff and people they settle for that. Or I've got all these buddies. But where's the one you can tell every single thing in your heart to? Where is the family? It's not supposed to be just one. Where is the family that you have that with? Deep relationships. And the other thing that God is talking about this year is vision. He's calling us to not just talk about vision, but to do it. And we're going to look a little bit more at that. I'm touching on some things here. But there is the high calling that he's calling us to. Philippians 3:10 says this, there's one thing I do, I press on towards the mark and the high calling of God. I press on towards the mark and the high calling of God. Now, the high calling is the only way that we are going to get out of any place of lukewarmness in our life. If there's any place that we have lukewarmness in our life, it's because we are not answering the high call of Philippians 3:10 that God has put upon us. And we must get on a path. This path, it is a specific path. There's many paths, there's many ways to go. But there is the path of the high calling. And it's time to get moving with that. And not many are on this path. Now, as a group, on Wednesday nights, we're going to be beginning after this conference, actually studying and going through this book by Rick Joyner. It's a prophetic book that he's just put out called The Path. And we're going to be beginning that on Wednesday nights. And I'm excited for it because it's a very specific and clear call in this hour, and to really look into it as a people. But I want to share, and I think I sent this out to some of you. I can't remember, I've been sending out a lot in the past couple of weeks. But that's because there's been some really amazing prophetic words that God is speaking to his people. But this has to do with vision. Rick Joyner wrote this. Almost everyone, Christians and non-Christians, have a vision of what they want to do or be. Yet very few fulfill it. Vision alone has never accomplished anything. Between the place of having a vision and seeing it fulfilled, there is always a lot of hard and tedious work that few visionaries have been willing to do. I think this was the source of what we was talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer in this. It was where he had frustration with visionaries because they talked a lot about vision but then didn't do anything about it. That is why, regardless of how good a person's vision sounds, I cannot get too encouraged about it until I see them also having a heart to work. Having the vision is the fun part. Walking it out will usually be much more difficult. Between the place where we receive the promise and the promised land, there's a wilderness that is the opposite of what we've been promised. This is When you get a prophetic word, almost always you're going to get the opposite happen in your life, almost every single time. And that wilderness is where our faith, we really need to get this. We really need to understand what I'm about to read that Rick wrote. The wilderness is where our faith in God is purified and our knowledge of ourselves becomes much more realistic. The wilderness is the place where the mere visionaries are separated from those who have true faith, who love the purposes of God enough to pay the price to see the vision fulfilled. That's the difference between those who say, oh my God, they're writing the book, they're doing this, they're going to wherever, they've done this, they've done that. Why? Because they didn't just hear the vision, write the vision, and look at it, and keep it on the refrigerator or in their Bible. They acted upon it. They've put feet to it. And that wilderness is the place of testing. And that's where most visions stay, in the wilderness. Just like the Israelites wandering around and around and around and around for 40 years. They didn't make it in. The next generation did. Who led them in? Joshua and Caleb. Why? Because they were visionaries who acted. They saw with the eyes of God. So, Psalm 87 talks about his foundation. Again, this is foundation, plumb lines we're talking about, foundations, what God is saying for this year, to be clothed, what was to stand upon. The foundation is in his holy mountain, and it says in Psalm 87, all of my springs and my source of life and joy are in you and in the city of God. And so there's this place, this path that he's inviting us to the high place, the high calling, the holy mountain of God, the city of God, what he is building, what he is doing. And in that is the place of all of his springs, which releases and brings joy into our lives. So the next thing that I want to look at is, I was going to read some stuff from Rick Joyner's book, but I'm not going to. I'm going to bypass that and go on. Maybe I'll come back to it. But I want to look at humility, because this is our next piece of clothing. And humility as critical as life. Absolutely critical. It says in 1 Peter 5:5-6, all of you are to serve each other in humility. For God opposes the proud, but favors the humble. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time, he will lift you up in honor. The place is always humility. The posture is always humility. You don't have to ask, what should I do? It's always humility. Always. Always, 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 always. The simple thing of when you go into a room, Jesus said, don't take the head of the table. Sit. You follow what I'm saying? In the rear. And wait to be invited to the head of the table if you're to be invited to the head of the table. It's not presuming where I belong here or there. No. It's the place of humility. It says in 1 Peter 5:5, I'm going to read it in a different version. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility, as the garb of a servant, so that its covering cannot possibly be stripped from you, with freedom from pride and arrogance towards one another. For God sets himself against the proud, the insolent, the overbearing, the disdainful, the presumptuous, the boastful, and he opposes, frustrates, and defeats them, but he gives grace, favor, blessing to the humble. That's quite a powerful passage in the Word of God. But I loved how it said, clothe yourselves, the garb of a servant, so that it cannot possibly be stripped from you. Wow. That's like putting it on with duct tape or something. You know what I'm saying? Nothing is going to get it off your body, or off your spirit, really. And Jesus, Jesus clothed himself with humility. It talks about that in Philippians 2, 3-10. I'm not going to read the whole passage, but it said, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. And therefore God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all names. I know I speak this a lot. I'm always referring to Philippians 2, but it's because it's really a plumb line for my life. It's a plumb line. When the enemy tries to whisper, oh, whatever, and pride wants to try and come in, all you have to do is think about Jesus and what he left behind and what he did in his posture of humility. Again, what does a disciple want to do? Become like Jesus and do everything that he did. Wear the clothing that he wore. He humbled himself as a slave and was obedient to God, even to death on the cross. I love how it says in Philippians 2, a little while later, when Paul is talking about his spiritual son, Timothy. And he says this, if the Lord Jesus is willing, I hope to send, he's saying this to the Philippians, Timothy to you soon for a visit. Then he can cheer me up by telling me how you are getting along. For I have no one else like Timothy who generally concerns himself about your welfare. All the others care only for themselves and not for what matters to Jesus Christ. But you know how Timothy has proved himself like a son with his father. He has served me, and on it goes. See, Timothy walked in a place of humility and servitude towards his spiritual father, Paul. And Paul was honoring him and sent him out, representing himself. It talks about, at the end, it says, welcome him with Christian love, with great joy, and give him the honor that people like him deserve. This was a different one now. I can't even pronounce his name, Epaphroditus. Anyways, I'm giving it my best shot. For he risked his life for the work of Christ. It was at the point of death while doing for me what you couldn't do from far away. And so here's another brother in the Lord, a true brother. He called him a true brother, a co-worker, a fellow soldier who risked his life for the work of Christ, even to the point of death. This is, sometimes we forget, this is like the closing greeting of his letter. And it's easy to read past that, but this is powerful. He risked his life to the point of death in servanthood. That means he wore himself out to the point that he almost died to serve Paul. That's profound. That's really profound. You understand? It's like, well, that's too far to drive, it's too cold out, it's too... Do I need to say any more? This is true discipleship. This is true Christianity. This was the first church. It was passionate in love. It's that, agapeo, it's that, for God so loved the world, that type of love had entered into their heart. That type of love had entered into their heart. And so, it's this koinonia of fellowship that the Lord is inviting us into so that we can share the good news of redemption with just this city here. Just this city is enough. Never mind the rest of the world, the rest of the United States, the rest of the North Shore. Let's just think about Cape Ann, this island. Cape Ann is not a project. The people are not projects. I'm not a project. I never wanted to be looked at as a project. We're children of God. Some are waiting to understand that they're children of God. And it's going out with the jealous love of God, with the passion of Jesus, and telling them about the sonship that we have. This heavenly Father who is just so phenomenal in his love. What he's really like. This is what the world is waiting to hear. What the Father and his love is really like. And that there is eternal security here and now. That we're loved, we're valued, we're cared for, and there's one whose hand never lets go of us. We can let go of his, but his hand never lets go of our hand. That's what we're meant to bring out and carry. And what I really believe is that what he's asking us to ask for and cry out for is a baptism of this love. It is a baptism of his love. I believe it is the answer really to everything. It's to love like what I'm talking about is nothing less than the baptism of the very heart of God, the love of God being poured into our lives experientially. This is not head. This is not reading it and memorizing it. You follow what I'm saying? This is crying out and saying, Father, I need a baptism of your love till I walk in this agapeo love, till I walk in this love that is that John 3:16. That we look at each person and we understand that Jesus hung on the cross for them and said, I can't and don't want to live without you. But the truth of it is he's left us to be his voice. He's left us to do the work. And he's not going to do what he's left us to do for us. He's waiting for us to. Leif Hetland wrote a book that is just phenomenal called The Baptism of Love. And it talks about how God encountered him, how he had, traveled the nations of the world doing signs and wonders, healing the sick, casting out demons. I mean, this man walked in amazing power. But he came to the point in his life where he had an encounter with God, and he had the waves of love of God go over him and wash over him and fill him. And he went from knowing about God's love to having an encounter with this love. That when he came up from that experience, everything and everyone looked completely different. Because he was now seeing through the eyes of love. God is love. He was seeing through the eyes of divine love. Everything in his life changed from that point on. Everything. And it's this that Jesus walked in. When the Father came and baptized him, this is, you are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. There was what took place there. It was this baptism of love that took place within him. This knowing, this confidence. How many of you know Charles Stanley? I think everybody knows Charles Stanley. I'd like to read you something that he wrote. Charles Stanley is another one. World-famous author, world-famous pastor. On TV, he's a precious, dear man of God. And he wrote this. He was crying out, where is this love? And he was meeting with several men. He asked several men to meet with him, several very seasoned leaders in the body of Christ, because he needed to share his heart of where he was in his life. And he said that he wrote 17 pages, longhand, legal-sized, of everything in his life that he just needed to unload. And he said, now whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. He read them this whole thing. They asked him a few questions, and then they said this. Charles, put your head on the table and close your eyes. I did, he said. And he said to me very kindly, Charles, I want you to envision your father picking you up in his arms and holding you. And after a few moments, he said, what do you feel? I burst out crying, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. I could not stop crying. Finally, when I stopped, he asked me again, what do you feel? And I said, I feel warm, loved, secure. I feel good. And I started weeping again. For the first time in my life, I felt emotionally that God loved me. I had known as a fact from his word that God loved me. I believed by faith that God loved me. I had accepted the fact that love is God's nature, but until that day, not many years ago, I had never emotionally felt God loving me. God used that encounter with those 4 men and that one simple question to unlock the love void in my life and to begin to pour into it a flood of his divine love. The full release of God's love didn't happen in a day. It was a process little by little. But the more I explored the love of God, the more God began to reveal my true identity in Christ, that I belonged to him as I had never belonged to anybody, that I was worth something to him, and that he loved me beyond measure. I discovered that when I got to the end of myself and all my efforts at striving for perfection, a kind and gracious Heavenly Father who had loved me unconditionally all my life, let me assure you, nothing is far more liberating than that discovery. For God's love for me became the source of a great love for others. The outpouring of God's love into my life positively affected my ministry and my relationship with others. I had been invaded by love, and I couldn't keep it to myself. See, this is the main reason why there is timidity in sharing or reaching out or being afraid of being rejected or whatever. We need an encounter with this love of God that we can't hold ourselves back from sharing about this amazing love of the Father. But we need it poured into our hearts. We need to encounter it daily. It is not enough to just read the passages about love or to even hear what I'm speaking tonight. What I'm trying to do is put a call and set a plumb line for this year, for our lives, for us as a body. This is what his invitation is to the world. Has been since he stretched his arms out and let them nail it to his cross. Stretched his feet out and let them nail it to a cross. They pierced his side. One of the statements he said that Leif wrote in this was, "Raging waters of everlasting compassion and mercy poured into him." Raging waters of everlasting compassion and mercy. Wow. There's a pain, Peter or Murray, or Loopy or David, or somebody in this room that paints, which isn't me. Raging waters of everlasting compassion and mercy. Today I sat down for a few minutes to have a cup of coffee, prepared my message, and I'd been doing a lot of things in the day, working, preparing for tonight, and I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on the couch, and my sister had told me there was figure skating on, and I haven't seen it for a couple of years. I wanted to see if I could catch the ice dancing, and so I sat down, and I couldn't find it, and I'm flipping through, what station is it on? I don't have a lot of stations, so I didn't have many choices, and it ended up going to The Perfect Storm. Now, we all know The Perfect Storm is about Gloucester. I haven't seen that movie since it came out. And I watched bits and pieces of it. When the commercial came on with the ice skating, I'd go back to The Perfect Storm, and I was catching these pieces of it. And my heart just began to break again for this city. I can't explain it. And we all know that the boat sunk in the perfect storm, the coming of 2 or 3 fronts together. And I just began to pray as I was sitting watching this, and though it was a movie, it was a really good portrayal, some of the scenes of this city. And I just said, my God, Father, what is it going to take to reach this city? I've lived here since 1981, and I feel that I haven't even made one dent. And I said, the only thing I know to do is 2 things. To cry out for the raging waters of everlasting compassion, mercy, and and love to pour into my heart and to pour into this city, to overtake this island like a tsunami wave. Because the hurting and the pain in this island alone, if you quiet yourself enough, your spirit will hear it. The cries in the night. And the need is so great. The homelessness in this city. How many of you know how many homeless people there are in this city right now? 600 families. Known and accounted for. Living in hotels, living in shelters. It's known, accounted for in this city of Gloucester. It's no longer the drug addict, the prostitute that's homeless, or the alcoholic. It's middle-class America who's living paycheck to paycheck, and some tragedy comes, and they're homeless. And as the body of Christ, if ever we need raging waves of everlasting compassion and mercy to flood our hearts, it is now. We would answer the cries in the sea of mankind. We have a hope, eternal, everlasting hope. He's left us here for a purpose. And I'm drawing a plumb line of what God is saying to his church. That's to me. I'm speaking the loudest to me. Compassion, clothed in compassion. Hearts filled with raging waters of compassion and mercy, because mercy always triumphs over judgment. God is mercy, and he's always looking to give mercy. Always. And we are called to be an ambassador of his mercy, compassion, and love, and that does not take an MDiv degree. It does not take doctor before your name, after your name, around your name. It does not take any title, degree. It takes nothing except knowing intimately the one who hung on a cross, the one who saved you, saved me, crying out for his love and walking in it. My gosh, I have so much to share. I just want to look at Jesus through a few familiar passages and his compassion. And in Matthew 14, we know it well. It's about John the Baptist and how John the Baptist was beheaded, how Herodias, danced before Herod, and she could have anything she wanted, and so her mother asked her to ask for the head of John the Baptist, and she did, and so John was now killed, and Jesus heard of his death, and he withdrew, it said, to a solitary place. Why? Because John, who was John to him? His cousin. John was the one that when they were both babies in the wombs of their mothers, John leaped when Mary came to meet with Elizabeth. He knew who this was in Mary's womb. John was the one who baptized Jesus and heard together, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." John was the one that prepared the way for him and then got out of the way. Well, that's like our call, prepare the way and then get out of the way. When the king comes in to a meeting, get out of the way. He's in, get out of the way. He's the one in charge. And so the crowds heard, that Jesus went off, that he went off. And he went off in a boat and they followed him. By land and the foot, they were followed him from the town, followed. And when he went ashore, there the crowd was. He was going to get away. He was going to deal with his own heart. And here was this crowd. He could have said, hey, it said he had compassion on them and cured the sick. Now, this wasn't a few people. It said they came from the towns. That would be many. He could have said, you know what, guys? I just need some space. I came here to have my little mini retreat. And I just need some quiet time. My cousin just died. I need to process this. I'm shutting off my cell phone. I'm turning off my iPhone. I just need some space. Nope. He didn't. heal them, because that's what compassion, the waves of compassion look like. It overtakes our own need. That which comes up from within. Do not deny what's before them. His tender kindness. He carried the Father's heart and released it. And it didn't end there. He healed them and ministered to them all day. Now it's nighttime. The evening comes and the disciples come and say, hey, send them away to go and get something to eat, to go and buy some food. And Jesus turns to them and says, don't send them away. You give them something to eat. 5,000 men, not including women and children. 5 loaves of fish, 5 loaves of bread, and 2 fishes, what they had. So Jesus tells the people to recline on the grass, get comfortable. He takes the 5 loaves, he takes the 2 fish, he blesses it, he looks up to heaven, he gives thanks. Why? Because he wants them to understand where this miracle they're about to see comes from. Because he only did what the Father was doing, he only said what the Father said. So he gives the food to the disciples, and we know it multiplies as they give it out. And it says that they are astonished. They're in awe. They're astonished. They're in awe of what God is doing. And what he's doing is more than just feeding them. This is hands-on discipling. He's discipling them in what compassion looks like. He has been the example. I came to seek quiet and solitude, but the crowds followed me. And compassion always rules my heart. So I'm showing you what disciple looks like. I'm showing you what my Father looks like, because I am the exact replica of my Father in heaven. And so, pity looks on. Oh, isn't that too bad? And walks on or drives by. Compassion acts. He didn't say, well, what are they going to do with the food? Are they going to eat it? Are they going to store it? What are they going to do with the food? No, he was just going to give it to them. There were no strings attached. Eat it, feed it to the fish, put it in your backpack, do whatever you want with it. But here it is. And so he's saying to them, and he's saying to us, Father, what do you want to do? How do we touch this region? You give them something to eat. And I'm not talking about physical bread, though that matters too. From my hand and my heart, through your heart and your hand, give them spiritual food of my love. And through practical actions of my provision, through my name, where it comes from, giving thanks, looking to heaven, where you're seated in heavenly places with me, where all divine provision comes from. You know, you can say, well, why isn't the bread multiplying? Because we're not out where the needs are. The loaves will multiply. The gifts will flow. Well, why aren't the signs and wonders taking place? Why aren't the healings coming forth? Who is it for? Why is it upon us? Who was he reaching? Those who came. Those who were in need. I know one thing. When Tom and I had our home and we opened it up and we took in the needy and the poor and the hungry and the drunks and the homeless, we saw food multiply in our home. More than once. One roast chicken fed 18 people with leftovers. That's absolutely impossible in the natural. But when people keep coming to your door because they're hungry and they know there's food there, the Father will be there. I've experienced it. It comes from compassion. It doesn't make me better or worse. What I'm saying is, God, I want to see that again. I want to see that again. It's the place where Matthew 18, when the master was, it says the master was filled with pity for this man. It was this man that had a debt. His debt was 10,000 talents, which is worth millions of dollars. And all of him and his whole family were going to be sold off as slaves until they could pay the debt off. And he cried out and he begged for time to pay it back, and instead he was completely forgiven. Millions of dollars, equivalent of millions of dollars today, he was completely forgiven. But then he turns around and he goes to an attendant, a fellow attendant that owed him $20. And he grabbed him by the throat. Grabbed him by the throat, David, and screamed at him and said, pay me what you owe me. And the other attendant saw it and went to the master. The master said, you wicked servant. And he cast him into to the torturers until all the debt would be paid. The master had compassion. And where I'm going with this is the other place that I believe God is really asking us to let him examine with his heart of love is, where are the places of debt that we won't forgive? And I'm not talking even financial. I'm talking emotional, spiritual. Things people have done wrong to us that we're still keeping the record of wrongs. We're still keeping a tally sheet. We're still holding in our hearts some place of bitterness or unforgiveness. And, can whisper under our breath, I hope you get what you deserve. Or pay me what you owe. Or I'll only forgive you when you repent for what you did. It says, forgive if you have been forgiven. Do we have compassion and walk in forgiveness? Will we stand in the gap with mercy and compassion for others, for this nation? Compassion. Psalm 103:17 says, but the mercy and loving kindness of the Lord are from everlasting to everlasting upon those who reverently and worshipfully fear him, and his righteousness is to the children's children. A couple more passages about Jesus. I'm not going to share the whole thing, but in John 11, this is the passage, this is the place where, Lazarus has died, and Martha and Mary are asking Jesus and saying, if only you had been here, he wouldn't have died. And we all know, Mary's saying this to him, but I want to read it from the Passion Translation. When Jesus looked at Mary and saw her weeping at his feet, and all her friends who were with her grieving, he shuddered with emotion and was deeply moved with tenderness and compassion. And what it also means there is his heart melted with compassion. His heart melted with compassion. And from that place, he said, Lazarus, come forth. And I've said before, he had to say specifically Lazarus, or everybody would have come out. Everybody. The whole tomb would have been empty. His heart melted with compassion. He said, God, I want my heart to melt with compassion. These are the gifts that I'm asking him for. Here's another place that we know very familiar, the healing pool of Bethesda. We know, the healing pool of Bethesda where the angel would come and stir the waters. There'd be hundreds around the pool, waiting for the angel to come, and whoever got in the pool first was healed. Well, do you know that pool in the Aramaic is called the house of loving kindness? Remember we talked about God's glory, who he called himself, how he described himself to Moses? It's God of loving kindness, gracious, all merciful. The house of loving kindness. The pool is full of loving kindness. And I believe that God is wanting to literally open up pools of Bethesda, pools, houses of loving kindness. I believe that Judah's Roar is meant to be a house of loving kindness, a pool of Bethesda where people come and we ourselves are healed, body, mind, soul, and spirit. He's told me that, and when I went to Israel, when I went to the pool of Bethesda, he spoke to me, and he said, I want to have in the United States of America and the nations of the world many pools of Bethesda. I'm getting ready to open up many pools of Bethesda all around the nations of the world. But that's made up of people who come together, you follow what I'm saying? With hearts of compassion. I'm just waiting to see where I'm going to go with this. Share this little bit, and then another place in the book of John, John 6:16. We know this story well. When the disciples got in the boat, and they didn't have Jesus in the boat. They got in the boat and they were heading over to the other side of the lake to go to Capernaum. And we know the story. They had rowed halfway across when a storm came up, and suddenly Jesus came walking on water, and they began to flip out. And at first, the name Capernaum, the city, that means the village of comfort. It's the village of comfort. That's what Capernaum means. And so Jesus walks on the water, and he says to them, what it means in the Aramaic is, fear not, I am. I love that. Fear not, I am. That's just so profound. And then it said he gets in the water, in the boat, and immediately they were transported to the other side. And so, you know, when we have the storms in our lives, he speaks to us, fear not, I am. He steps into our boat, and whether he suddenly transports us to the other side and the storm is over, or he just goes through the rest of the storm with us. It's this place that he's calling us to walk in this place. And where did they end up? They ended up at Capernaum, the village of comfort, because he is the God of comfort. He always brings us to the place of comfort. He gets in the boat, he gets into the midst of our storms, and he says, fear not, I am. And then he brings us into the place of comfort. He brings us into the place called the realm of the I am. I don't have time to go into that tonight. But there is a realm that he calls the realm of I am. What I want to go into is just a little bit deeper in compassion, because I want to go and I want us to take communion tonight. I have a lot more, but I just want to focus on this last couple of pieces. Michael Engel wrote a book called Compassion. It's absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And I'm going to read, again, a couple of paragraphs from here. I don't always do this type of reading, but there were just specifics that I wanted to say the way that these writers had prophetically received this from God. To try and paraphrase it wouldn't do it justice. So the source of all compassionate action, God's compassionate heart. Our compassion is a reflection of the all-compassionate one. Our love, replicated in our action towards others, is a reflection of the depth of our relationship with God. He longs for us to become love and compassion in the midst of a world starving for just a little love. You see, to become love. That's my goal for this year. To become love. That every part of my being is love. that if somebody bumps up against me or touches me, or an offense comes my way, what responds is love. Love. No matter what comes at me, what the response is love. To do so, we must get to know him intimately and personally. We must be connected to the source and allow his love to flow through us, because as that love begins to fully flow to us from the Father, it will eventually flow through us to others in loving words and compassionate acts. His gaze has utterly captured me. As in any relationship, if I want more of him, I must give him more of me. I must learn to walk and talk love as Jesus did and as he continues to do. But this is a journey into the heart of God, where I will and must learn his ways. To know his mercy and compassion, we must open the door of our hearts to him and go to a place where he exposes the tenderness of his heart into the written word. And so, you see, it doesn't just happen. We have to open our hearts, and we have to invite him in, and we have to ask him for this gift of mercy and compassion, for this place of this agapeo love. It's this place of mercy and justice come together, because it's this place of seeing through his eyes of mercy. It's seeing through his eyes of mercy. It's so critical that we see that way, and I'm having, because of time, to leave out a lot more that I wanted to share. But what I do want to do is open up a time for communion. And I'm just going to end with that. I'm not going to go any further into my message, though there's a lot more. I guess this could be a 3 or 4 part message. I am going to read one more thing. This was in the Shepherd's Rod again, by Bob Jones, and with this we'll go into communion. This is actually written by Bonnie, him and his wife. Bob and Bonnie received this from the Lord. Bob and I were both given a set of binoculars and a whistle. The binoculars were to give us a vista view into the pool of Papa's love. It could only be viewed from the top of the mountain, or from the road that led beside it. There was another road we could take to our destination, which was quicker. However, we would miss the view. But which road we took would be our choice. The whistle looked like a French horn, although it was small. And when we blew it, the sound was so penetrating, it could wake the dead. And as the Lord handed it to us, he said we should blow it to wake my people up in the morning. I believe it's a new day, and there are new gifts for the journey ahead in this season.